Let me start with international news. So it is being reported that China has now become involved with the conflict in Syria. The Chinese military will provide aid and training to the Syrian government under a deal reached between a Beijing envoy and Syria's defense minister in Damascus. This deal was reached last Sunday, not this previous Sunday, but August the 14th. So essentially, China is offering to train Syrian military personnel and provide them humanitarian aid. Now, this differs. This is different from their past cooperation due to the direct engagement. Now, this is direct engagement between militaries. So no, right now the extent of the engagement, the entire breadth and depth of it, we don't have those details, but they are getting involved. And it's important to note, or I think it's interesting to note at least, that China with Russia voted against the UN Security Council draft resolution that would have deployed a Libyan-like envoy response to the Syrian crisis. And the reason I bring that up is because it really kind of shows the parallel interest that China and Russia have in Syria. Now, China has their own interests, their particular goals, but they find themselves in a similar position as Russia. But if you look at the resolution and the idea of sending to Syria the same type of UN envoy that went, not envoy, but the UN action, right? The no-fly zone, which opened up Libya to European forces that helped topple Gaddafi, right? So it was the direct results of the first UN resolution, Security Council resolution that China and Russia initially, they voted for the first one. The results of that in Libya were not only destabilizing, but the result was the overthrow of Gaddafi. Now, if Bashar al-Assad is a favorable regime for China and Russia, then it absolutely makes sense that they would, and they did, vote against the UN resolution that tried to replicate in Syria what happened in Libya. Now, so that's just a backdrop to show that China does have and has acted previously in the best interest of the Assad regime. And so now it makes sense that they're getting involved here in a direct fashion, directly with Syria's defense minister in Damascus. So we'll be keeping bringing more information with regard to that. So there is no, and this is important to note because just seeing some other commentators deal with this story, questioning whether or not we should start to call this a world war because of how many different powers are involved in the region. China in particular, there is no direct intervention in the conflict itself. But it is a direct connection to the conflict, an advisory role. You know, in terms of the bigger conversation, there is a growing number of forces involved with a very complex set of agendas and interests. And we do see something that appears to be a alignment of interest between Iran, Syria, the Assad regime in Syria, at least, China and Russia. I still don't buy into the idea that this is a full-blown proxy war. I'm getting closer to agreeing with that statement, but I think there's too many competing interests in the region right now for there to be a clear-cut proxy war. And in the sense of a proxy war being serving a great power, a superpower, competing with another great power and a superpower, it's almost like the interests are, I don't know to what extent it is that China and Russia really have an equal for this to be a proxy war, because I feel like America's involvement has been limited. Let's just call it limited, to say the least. And it feels as though we don't have enough political will. And this is a good thing in this regard. Like, it is a mess. The region is destabilized. There's a lot going on, but it doesn't appear as though we have enough vested interest to be a competing force against China and Russia's interest to make it a legitimate proxy war. Yeah, we're all involved, but the extent to which we're involved is very different. And the interests that we have are not necessarily competing because of ISIS, right? There's some overlap. We have overlapping interest in the region in terms of destroying ISIS. It's simply a question of which power is going to be installed after the destruction of ISIS. However, I don't know if America is really as concerned about that at this point as much as they are concerned about ridding the region of quote unquote ISIS. And the reason I say that is because the extent to which we're willing to get involved to prop up or to tear down, in this case, that other power. So not that other power, but rather the Assad regime. It does look like China and Russia have clearly delineated and made it known to the world, obviously, that they're on the side of Assad, and they're going to do whatever they can to prop up Assad against the rebels and against ISIS. America is saying that we're going to have limited engagement against this civil war between the rebels and Assad, but we're interested definitely in what's going on with ISIS. And for that reason, I'm not sure that I can really say that this is a proxy war, let alone some of the more fear-mongering groups that say that this is a third, at what point should we call this a third world war? I'm not really, definitely not at that point. But I do think it's interesting for us to keep an eye on the extent to which China wants to use the region as a means of projecting their domestic interests, their foreign, the image of them being a great power, a world power. And because actually, I think there's an interesting quote here from one of their officials, Wang Jian, a Middle East specialist at the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences. Actually, he's spoken to the South China Morning Post and said China's help to Syria would give China a bigger say in both a solution to the Syrian issue and in the Middle East. And that would be good for better protection of China's interest in the region. And to become a so-called responsible world power, more proactive gestures are needed. So for China, they not only want to, assist the Assad regime, but they have some interests, some national interests that says that, one, we want the Assad regime in there, but we want a more stabilized region. So I just don't see enough conflicting interests between the great powers to call it a proxy war yet. But there's enough blood in the soil over there, and enough forces over there that it's definitely a quagmire, to say the least.